on behalf of the Lehighton Area Heritage Alliance, the Lehighton Legion, and the Lehighton UVO, I want to welcome you to Songs and Stories honoring our veterans. This program started actually last year. We did our Songs and Stories of the Mausoleum that we've done quite a few times, and Kevin Long reached out to us and asked if we could do this program at the Legion in honor of Veterans Day. So we had to reschedule to the parade a little bit, but I'm glad to see so many faces here today to enjoy this lovely program. So we are the Lehighton Area Heritage Alliance, the Lehighton Historical Society. We are a very small group of dedicated volunteers who still work and are committed to preserving the heritage of our Lehighton area. Our ultimate goal is to have a heritage center where we can display all this awesome memorabilia and things that we have to represent our town and the history that we have here. So Kevin and the Legion have done a great job with that as well. There is a museum here in progress.
Yes.
It'll be open after then, so you guys can take a look at that. Our small group of volunteers has been working hard at trying to find a heritage center space in Lehighton, and things are starting to progress with that, so definitely stay tuned. Soon we can hope to announce some things on that, and anything that you donate here today is going to be split between the Historical Society, the UVO, and the Legion. So please give if you're able. We also have some books there on the table with some old photos of Lehighton if you're interested in looking at anything with that. So today we have Kathy Long telling stories, and we have Dave Matsinko doing our music. So before I talk too much more, I'm going to have you all stand and we're going to do the national anthem.
Hand over your heart.
After World War I, the poppy flourished in Europe. Scientists attributed the growth to the soils in France and Belgium becoming enriched with lime from the rubble left by the war. From the dirt and mud grew a beautiful red poppy. The poppy came to symbolize the blood shed during the battle following the publication of the wartime poem In Flanders Fields. The poem was written by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, MD, while serving on the front lines. On September 27, 1920, the poppy became the official flower of the American Legion. To memorialize the soldiers who fought and died during the war. And in 1924, the distribution of poppies became a national program of the American Legion. I'd like to go back into some of the history of the area and tell you about some of the people from this area who were in various wars. Peter Notstein Now, somebody just talked to me about Dr. Valiant. Dr. Valiant was a well-loved physician around here. He had married a Notestein, and that Notestein woman that he married was actually a descendant of Peter Notestein. Peter narrowly escaped death in the Battle of Long Island when 200 troops of Sullivan's army were driven into the marshes. He survived only by swimming the cold waters to the opposite shore with his flintlock musket strapped to his back. There he rejoined remnants of the Continental Army, and during the next 5 years, he took part in many battles. It has been told that he eventually fought under General Washington at the famous Battle of Brandywine Creek. There is a story that goes around that gives you an idea of the heart of a soldier. Horror gripped the heart of a World War I soldier as he saw his lifelong friend fall in battle. Caught in a trench with gunfire whizzing over his head, the soldier asked his lieutenant if he could go out into no man's land and bring back his fallen comrade. "You can go," said the lieutenant, "but I don't think it will be worth it. Your friend is probably dead, and you may throw your life away." The soldier went anyway. Miraculously, he managed to reach his friend, hoisted him onto his shoulder, and brought him back to the trench. As they tumbled together in the trench, the officer checked the wounded soldier and then looked kindly at his friend. He said, "I told you it wouldn't be worth it. Your friend is dead, and you may be mortally wounded." But the soldier said that it had been worth it. The lieutenant said, "How can that be? Your friend is dead." "That may be so," said the soldier, "but he was still alive when I got to him, and I had the satisfaction of hearing him say, 'Jim, I knew you'd come.'" Many times in life, whether a thing is worth it or not, it really depends on how you look at it. Take up all your courage and do something that your heart tells you to do, so that you may not regret not doing it later in life. That is what a soldier does. A soldier follows his heart and does what needs to be done.
I'd like to start off with a song. It was popular in the Civil War, but it also originated during the Revolutionary War, called "When Johnny Comes Marching Home." I'm sure you're all familiar with it. We'll be playing a number of songs from this era, from the beginning of our Revolutionary War time, all the way through the end of World War II as well. Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah. Give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies, they will all turn out. Joyful day when Johnny comes marching home. The old church bell will peal with joy, hurrah, hurrah. Welcome home, our darling boy, hurrah, hurrah. The village lads and the lassies say, roses they will strew away with joyful day when Johnny comes marching home. Jubilee, hurrah, hurrah. Give the hero 3 times 3, hurrah, hurrah. The laurel wreath is ready now to place upon his loyal brow. Joyful day when Johnny comes marching home. Johnny comes home again. Hurrah, hurrah. Give them a hearty welcome then. Hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies they will all turn out for joy that day when Johnny comes marching home. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Serge Grankovich and his wife both served as Army officers in World War II. Serge served in the Pacific Theater of Operations, while Annette was in the China-Burma-India Theater. Upon her return, she was assigned to the Valley Forge Hospital. Dr. Clyde Graver, who was my dentist when I was a little girl, and was remarkably thrilled that I had no cavities. So I think he thought that was all his doing. He served 2 years during World War II with the U.S. Army Air Corps and later served 2 years in the newly formed U.S. Air Force, where he attained the rank of captain. Dr. R. Roy Ronimus graduated Temple University and was inducted into the U.S. Army on the same day. Dr. Ronimus was a member of the famed Merrill's Marauders of the China-Burma-India Theater. The Marauders were admired for their missions behind enemy lines, where they often engaged enemy forces superior in number. They fought through treacherous jungle terrain and were constantly exposed to tropical diseases. Their secret to success was the aid provided by 14 Japanese-American intelligence translators. Every man, including Roy Ronimus, suffered from malaria and dysentery, and each of them was awarded the Bronze Star for their service. Of the original 2,997 men that comprised the unit, only 130 officers and GIs were considered combat effective when the Marauders were disbanded. For many years after the war, Roy suffered lingering effects of malaria. Roy surprised his parents when he arrived home unannounced following the end of the war. He was the recipient of 3 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart. For years, he was reluctant to discuss his experiences in battle. The trauma of seeing a friend die in the same foxhole that you occupied was not easy to talk about. We also had a program called Extraordinary Stories of Ordinary People. Jack Anthony was older than many of those around him when he enlisted when World War II broke out. But he was passionate about his service to his country. He was sent to the European theater and was severely wounded twice. He came home with 2 Bronze Stars and 2 Purple Hearts, decorations that spoke volumes of what he went through. The war took its toll on Jack, and he didn't talk much about it upon his return. But years later, at a reunion of soldiers, Jack was stunned when a buddy that he thought had been killed so long ago walked into the room. It was an emotional reunion for both men. Jack would not meet his wife until years later. They married in 1951, but Ruth played a role in the war as well. East Penn Airport was a half a mile away from the Ginder homestead, where Ruth grew up. The DeLong family, who owned the airport, felt compelled to teach women how to maintain and repair aircraft. Ruth was proud to learn these skills. She was able to walk to the airport, many times with her young daughter in tow. Bernice was quite embarrassed because her mother was not wearing a dress like most women would wear. Her mother was wearing pants like a man. The DeLongs believed people should be prepared to help with the war effort in the event that the government needed trained workers. Ruth and other women like her were willing and able to follow that call to duty. Henry Geisel entered the Army in 1940. He was a member of the 9th Infantry Division known as the Old Reliables. He was in the 39th Anti-Tank Company, and their slogan was, anything, anytime, anywhere, bar nothing. AAAO was painted on their helmets. His service was much in demand as he spoke fluent German. While stationed in Tunisia, Henry saw heavy fighting and developed yellow fever. He was sent to England to recover. From there, he went to Sicily, where he developed severe poison ivy, and once again was sent to England to recover. While on leave one day, Henry and a buddy walked over to the nearby town of Andover. They came upon some young ladies wading in a stream, and one of them had a bloody nose. He offered her his handkerchief. After a conversation, there was an exchange of addresses. The young woman was Mary Lewis, who lived with her mother and grandmother. In fact, Mary's mother worked as an air raid warden, and the family took in 2 young sisters who were evacuees from the bombings in London to live with them. Henry's company landed on Omaha Beach in Normandy, June 8, 1944, 2 days after D-Day. When France was secured, his division marched on to Germany into the Hurtgern Forest and fought in the Battle of the Bulge in Bastogne, Belgium. As a respite from the fighting, he corresponded regularly with his parents. He drew cartoons depicting Army life, and he wrote to Mary as well. Henry arrived back in the United States in 1945. He then composed his most meaningful letter to Mary, asking her to consider coming to the United States and marrying him. He knew this was a lot to ask, as she would have to leave her mother and her grandmother behind. Mary took some time to consider the proposal, but she finally agreed. She arrived in New York City Harbor on the Queen Elizabeth, April 20th, 1948, at the age of 20. Is another holiday where we'll remember him. From Columbus, Mississippi, to Waterloo, New York, to Boalsburg, Pennsylvania, over 25 cities claim to be the birthplace of Memorial Day. The first major organized observance was called Decoration Day on May 30th, 1868 at Arlington National Cemetery. Ulysses S. Grant presided over the ceremony. After the speeches, children from local orphanages walked through the cemetery with members of the Grand Army of the Republic and placed flowers on the graves of both Union and Confederate soldiers. Decoration Day evolved into Memorial Day, and in 1971, the Uniform Monday Holiday Act took effect. So the date went from being May 30th to the last Monday in May. Memorial Day's changes underwent scrutiny by Northerners and Southerners alike, but overall, the holiday has brought people together. Americans still honor it today with celebrations and remembrances of those who died fighting for their country.
Music during the Civil War and during wartime. Music played such an important part on both sides. Drums, bugles, and fifes were played to issue marching orders and sometimes simply to boost the morale. Next two songs that I want to do, one talks about morale. It's called Tramp, 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 written near the end of the Civil War in 1864 by George F. Root. And it was written to give hope to the Union soldiers that were trapped behind enemy lines in prison camps near the end. And although it was written in 1864, I'm sure what this song is about and how it's portrayed. Anyone that would be in a prison camp would also be looking for their soldiers and for their friends to come along and get them out. The chorus talks about hope that their fellow soldiers are coming along to help them. In this prison cell I sit, thinking, mother dear, of you, and her bright and happy home so far away. And the tears, they fill my eyes, in spite of all that I can do, though I try to cheer my comrades and be gay. Tramp, 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 boys are marching. Cheer up, and comrades, they will come. And beneath the starry flag, we shall breathe the air again of the free land in our own beloved home. In the battlefront we stood, with their fiercest charge they made, and they swept us off 100 men or more. But before they reached our lines, they were beaten back and dismayed, and we hear the cry of victory o'er and o'er. Tramp, 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 the boys are marching. Cheer up, and comrades, they will come. And beneath the starry flag, we shall breathe the air again of the free land in our own beloved home. So within this prison cell, we are waiting for the day that they'll come to open wide the prison door. And the hollow eye grow bright, and the poor heart almost gay, when we think of seeing home and friends once more. Tramp, 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 the boys are marching. Cheer up, comrades, they will come. And beneath the starry flag, we shall breathe the air again in the free land in our own beloved home. Tramp, 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 George F. Root. Thank you. Music was used for many reasons to bring up the spirits of the troops and the men, and also as recreation. Many songs were written and to keep the spirits up again, and as I could say, humor. This next song written during the Civil War, because of the conditions and the food that the men were eating, called goober peas. That's what this song is. Sitting by the roadside on a summer's day, chatting with my messmates, passing time away, laying in the shadows underneath the trees. Goodness, how delicious, eating goober peas. Peas, 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 eating goober peas. Goodness, how delicious, eating goober peas. When a horseman passes, the soldiers have a rule to cry out at their loudest, "Hey, mister, here's your mule." But there's another pleasure enchantinger than these, is wearing out your grinders, eating goober peas. Peas, 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 eating goober peas. Goodness, how delicious, eating goober peas. Just before the battle, the general hears a row. He said, "The Yanks are coming, I hear their rifles now." He turns around around in wonder, and what do you think he sees? The Georgia militia eating goober peas. Peas, 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 eating goober peas. Goodness, how delicious, eating goober peas. I think my song has lasted almost long enough. The subject's interesting, the rhymes are mighty tough. I wish this war was over and free from rags and fleas. We'd kiss our wives and sweethearts and gobble goober peas. Peas, 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 eating goober peas. Goodness, how delicious, eating goober peas. Peas, 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 eating goober peas. Goodness, how delicious, eating goober peas. Goober peas. Thank you. Thank you. I understand that song used to be taught in grade schools, elementary schools. I missed it somewhere along the line, but it's a cool song anyway. Thank you. Yeah.
This is a time that we would like others to share their stories. So, whichever you want.
I'm going to compress 28 years into 3 to 5 minutes. Believe me, we know the food is ready back there. But I'm Dennis Camara, a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, and when I think of trying to summarize my service, I was taught one of service. My father was in World War II, spent over 2 years fighting the Japanese in the Pacific Theater. My brother was in Vietnam, flew 128 missions, and survived that experience. So I joined the military while I was in college, at Penn State, the Army ROTC program, and maybe most of the officers that are commissioned come through the ROTC programs in all of our universities. One of our most famous is General Colin Powell, who is an ROTC graduate as opposed to a service graduate at West Point or Annapolis. But I was commissioned in 1976, and it was a RIF, a reduction in force, right after Vietnam. I was given a reserve commission, and I spent most of my career during the Cold War. So I spent many trips to Germany as not only an engineer officer, but an MP officer, and then as an ordnance officer. Ordnance is maintenance and munitions. And either we're at the right place at the right time when we're in the military, depending on whether you want to get deployed to a combat zone. And my run time was in March of '03, the 4th rotation after 9/11. And just briefly, if you look at the history of all the wars, even though, and it's less today because it's one team, one fight, with the active component, the National Guard, and the reserves. But years ago, there was a bit of a serious competition. But today, the active army, which is the standing army that we pay for very dearly, has National Guard and reserve components. And so when you think of the 28th Division here in Pennsylvania, which was an infantry division and fought in the Battle of the Bulge. So when you see that red keystone, the red means is the bloody bucket of all the Pennsylvanians in the 28th Division we lost in the Battle of the Bulge. So many Guard Reserve units were activated during wartime. And of course, after 9/11, as we always said, before that, Coach put us in, and he certainly put us in after 9/11. And I was with the 213th Area Support Group in Allentown, and we were activated for war. So we went from Pennsylvania Guard to active duty, and we were logistics headquarters. And let me just say that and it's amazing that we share the stories of the infantry folks, but there's two main strengths to the United States military. One is the non-commissioned officer corps, which we're going to hear from Sergeant Long, Because if an officer gets killed in combat, the unit still knows how to function because of the non-commissioned officer corps. The other strength of the United States military is our logistics. It's called our logistics trains. I mean, the famous story we can tell is Patton running out of fuel during the Battle of the Bulge. So for every soldier fighting, there are 7 soldiers behind that soldier providing food, water, ammunition, clothing, fuel, keeping their equipment running. A soldier cannot function unless all those logistical support is behind them. And so I ended up, long story short, we went as a brigade logistics headquarters. We got to Bagram, and Spike, if you could hold up that, this is a symbol from Afghanistan, from Kabul, the capital, where in 2003 the Afghans made that as a symbol to show the partnership between our country and their country, and symbolizing what happened on 9/11 and talking about our partnership. Okay, thanks. And as we talk about the global war on terrorism, in the military we're taught doctrine. This position does this thing. Well, the global war on terrorism was a non-doctrinal mission. We get in country to Bagram, and they said, we need you to do something else. So they took myself as the support operations director, the logistics director of a headquarters, a brigade headquarters commanded by a colonel. And they said, Colonel Damara, you're going to take a third of your staff, and you're going to K2, Karshi-Kahanabad Air Base in Uzbekistan. Now, if you haven't seen the movie 12 Strong, I recommend you watch that movie. It's about a squad of 12 Special Forces soldiers that started on the base that I commanded. I took over, talking about pressure, I took over as a National Guard Lieutenant Colonel on active duty from a full bird colonel active duty to command Karshi-Kahanabad Air Base. And that was the logistics base where all of the war started, 16 October after 9/11. So that movie depicts the early part of the war of 12 Special Forces soldiers working with General Dostum in Afghanistan. There were warlords that commanded, say, a couple counties in Pennsylvania, if you think of it in that terms. And our Special Forces soldiers worked with General Dostum. We thought it would take 18 months to take care of Al-Qaeda. It took 3 weeks. And that's what that movie is about. But I commanded that base for 14 months. Very difficult as a soldier, leaving my family, saying goodbye to my wife and children. And I'll close with this. I'm sure in a lot of stories about war, a soldier's faith is very important. And I guess we've even heard of foxhole conversions. Well, I went to war as a believer, as a Christian, and a friend of mine, I brought my dog tags with me, gave me a shield of faith with the Bible verse, Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee wherever thou goes. And I carry that with me to comfort me. Thank you.
I guess most of you know who I am. Everybody knows me as Spike. Even as I was deployed, my colonel did not call me by my rank. As Sergeant First Class, he always called me Spike. And he just had that much faith and confidence in me. As an 18-year-old boy, I enlisted right out here at Lehighton Armory with the 723rd MP Company. It was the best offer I got for the military at the time. I had a Marine Corps recruiter at the house, an Air Force recruiter. The Army National Guard recruiter came and he says, "You take up combat arms, we'll give you a $1,500 bonus." Okay, I'm 18, $1,500, that's a deal. So my first commitment, I had to do a commitment of 6 years, and I collected half of my $1,500, and then I got another half at the end of my 6-year commitment. During this time, I did a lot of MP work. We were always in the field. We weren't the white hat MPs that you see, and I learned a lot of field work, and it was a lot of interesting for me. I really had to bone up on my math skills, learn a lot of map reading, and a lot of compass, and it was well worth it. I ended up my career and over 20 years in the Army National Guard. I even got to serve a short period of time with my dad. My dad and I actually got to serve in the same unit together, which is a pretty unique thing. So I appreciated the fact that my dad and I were able to do that for a few short years. My dad took 17-year break and got back in to finish. I have 3 MOSs. I was a 95 Bravo military policeman for over 10 years. I was a 16 Sierra for a short while with Air Defense Artillery, and I was a crew chief. I was out in the field with a manned portable air defense system, and then I was transferred into the headquarters company where I became the S3 operations sergeant. And from there, to get some rank, I transferred and I went to same unit as Colonel DeMera. I went to 213 3rd Support Group. At 213 3rd Support Group, I became the section sergeant for security section of the headquarters group, and they went through what they call an MTO, where they change everything around, and I got into logistics. So I got another MOS and became 92 Alpha, and I was an automated logistical specialist. All my time in combat arms, I was never deployed. In 1996, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I get a phone call. It's time to go down to the armory, you gotta report to the armory, we got a meeting. Well, I'm a senior sergeant, so I figured it's that BS again, because once you get stripes and rockers, there's always meetings. Even though you're supposed to be a part-time, you're almost all the time with meetings and training. And so I said, well, okay. I went down to the armory that day. There was a warrant officer at the front door with a clipboard. He goes, Sergeant Long, he goes, you gotta go and report to the classroom. So I reported to that classroom, and along with 49 other individuals from 213 3rd Support Group, we were placed in that room. The doors were shut, and a little while later, our colonel came in, screen dropped down, says, everybody in this room now, says you're all on open orders. We don't know how long you're gonna go. We just know this is where you're gonna go. We were given orders for Tazar, Hungary, in southern Hungary. It was an old Soviet MiG site. We were gonna run the staging base for a whole NATO operation. We were gonna support the mission in Bosnia. So, between Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's of that year, we did the training and we prepared. One notice that we got that day when we were put in that classroom was, get your life together at home, make sure you have everything together, and be back here next week at a certain time, on a certain date. We'll have the military lawyers in here, we're gonna draw up your will. So that's when it hits you that it's real, it's time. Everything that we train for, everything that, it's what we do. And when we fell on the ground over there, I spent a week in Bavaria, Germany, in Hohenfels training area. We learned cold weather survive in a combat zone. After Germany, we were sent to our base, to Tazar Air Base. It was part of a NATO operation. This flag, this is a flag that I had. Was on vehicles. This denotes that we were part of a NATO force. On this side over here is the English side, S4, because we were stabilization force, and this side is the Croatian letters on the other side. Of course, the 2 NATO stars. It's also the patch that I wear on my sleeve, which is a NATO patch. Like Dennis said, it's always the uncertainty and the not knowing, and the creature comforts that we know and we appreciate here at home, we don't always get over there. And just one little short story here, fresh water, drinking water. Everybody takes for granted you can walk to a tap and get a drink of water. When we were over there, we had a unit that was called part of a quartermaster crew that did water purification. They had a truck with a reverse osmosis purification unit on it. That means they could throw a hose over this crap all over here, suck that god-awful, disgusting water out of there, run it through the truck, bring it down the other side, and they would put it in this kind of bladder bag right here. This was our fresh water. The water that we used to shower and everything else, we always looked like we had a spray tan. We were like brown, like had a brown glow from the water that we had to bathe with over there. But it was a very interesting operation. And again, I was assigned to 213th Area Support Group, but we fell on ground as the higher command. There was 71st Corps Support Battalion, which was stationed out of Germany. And for a little while, for about a month, they sent me with that other unit. So I wasn't even with 213th Area Support Group. I was with 71st Corps Support Battalion, regular Army attachment for about a month. I had a unique job while I was there at the air base. My job was terrain management. There was an 03, which was the captain, and myself. And we were in charge of everything on the ground, everything that everybody needed. A place to fix vehicles, a place to go to the bathroom, a place to go to the shower. All that stuff became our responsibility and led those people where they need to go. I would get calls from full bird colonels from bases down like Tuzla and everywhere, and they would have to take the orders from me of what they needed to do when they got on ground. So I had a very unique experience, and I worked with NATO troops, of course. So even though we're from all different countries, wear different uniforms, speak different languages, we were all there for the same cause, and it was very interesting. And I do have some stuff over there at the bar, and afterwards, if you would like, I definitely share it with you. Anything that you have, any more questions. I much appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to jump to music of World War I and talk about what music was like in World War I. The music halls were the main places where people would go to hear music. Working class audiences. The songs were sentimental love songs, enthusiasm for war, dreams about the end of war. At that time, there were no radios or TV, and songs had a romantic view of war, and men were portrayed there as brave and noble, and women were fragile and loyal. That was what the songs portrayed back then. Two of the most popular songs of that time. The first was written by Irving Berlin in 1918. And I know that starts, there's a bugle part to the beginning of it. Think of yourself as 17 or 18 years old and you're going to war and you're going to a foreign country and waking up to a bugle call. I'm not going to do that. I won't do that to you. No, but anyway, this song is called Oh, How I Hate to Get Up in the Morning. The other day I chanced to meet a soldier friend of mine. He'd been in camp for several weeks and he was looking fine. His muscles had developed and his cheeks were rosy red. And I asked him how he liked the life, and this is what he said. Oh, how I hate to get up in the morning. Oh, how I'd love to remain in bed. for the hardest blow of all, to hear the bugle call. You gotta get up, you gotta get up in the morning. Someday I'm going to move with you. Someday they're going to find him dead. I'll amputate his revelry and step upon it heavily and spend the rest of my life in bed. Oh, how I hate to get up in the morning. Oh, how I'd love to remain in bed for the hardest blow of all, to hear the bugle call. You gotta get up, you gotta get up, you gotta get up in the morning. Oh boy, the minute the battle is over. Oh boy, the minute that foe is dead, I'll put my uniform away and move to Philadelphia and spend the rest of my life in bed. Oh, poor guy. Thank you. In 1917, wrote a song which at that time was the most popular for the World War I. It was called Over There. And I'm sure you've heard it. Kind of liked it in the Mausoleum when we didn't have a PA and I wasn't electrified and I wasn't tripping over cords and things. Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun, and take it on the run, on the run, on the run. Hear them calling you and me, every son of liberty. Hurry right away, no delay. Make your daddy glad to have had such a lad. Tell your sweetheart not to mind. Be proud, her boy's in line. Over there, send the word over there. That the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. The drumming everywhere. So prepare, say the prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over, and I can't come back over there. Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Take it on the run, on the run, on the run. Hear them calling you and me to every son of liberty. Hurry right away. Make your daddy glad to have such a lad. Tell your sweetheart not to mind, to be proud, her boy's in line. Over there, send the word over there. That the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming, drumming everywhere. So prepare, say the prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, they're coming over, and I'm coming back over there. Over there. Thank you very much.
John Summerfield Staples. He was born in 1845 in Stroud Township. He enlisted in 1862 as a private in Company C, 176th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment. He served only a few months due to illness, probably typhoid. He got a medical discharge and he moved to Washington, D.C. to work with his father as a carpenter. During the Civil War, it was customary for citizens to pay for substitutes to serve in the Army in their place. Late in 1864, Staples was approached by a representative of President Lincoln. Hoping to set a good example, President Lincoln selected Staples as a representative recruit and offered him $500. He was 19 years old and mustered in as a private into Company H of the 2nd District of Columbia Infantry Regiment on October 1st, 1864. John saw little action during the year as the president's representative. He primarily was working as a clerk and a prison guard. He mustered out in September 1865, and at the war's end, John Summerfield Staples returned to Pennsylvania, where he died in 1888. He is buried in Stroudsburg Cemetery. He was an ordinary man who never rose above private, but he left behind an extraordinary legacy. John D. Bertolet was born June 11, 1839, in Reading, Pennsylvania. He was studying law in Mock Chunk under the tutelage of attorney Charles Albright when the war broke out. He quickly volunteered his services, and on April 22, 1861, he was commissioned as a first lieutenant in the 6th Pennsylvania Infantry, a 3-month unit commanded by Colonel James Nagel. When that term of service expired, Nagel raised the 48th Pennsylvania Infantry a 3-year regiment. On August 29, 1862, John Bertolet was seriously wounded at the Second Battle of Bull Run. He was shot down with a bullet slamming into his thigh. When Nagel tendered his resignation in the spring of 1863, Bertolet, still recovering from his wound, remained with the brigade, advancing to the rank of captain, then major, and ultimately colonel by brevet. He was mustered out of service in 1866. Following the war, he returned to Mock Chunk, working as a partner in Albright's firm before establishing his own independent law practice. In 1869, Bertolet married Sarah Jane Luce. Their union proved to be a short one. On April 17, 1881, John Bertolet passed away at the age of 41, and he is buried in Lehighton Cemetery. You have a photograph?
There's a portrait of John Bertolet in our museum room over here.
Yes, there is a portrait of him in the museum, and after the event, you will be able to go in and see that. There are a lot of stories about the Civil War and about the North and about the South, and about possibly how they thought of each other. 2 years after the Civil War, Sergeant Gilbert Bates of Wisconsin made an unusual bet that he could walk from Vicksburg to Washington, D.C. alone, unarmed, penniless, carrying an unfurled American flag, and subsist solely on Southern hospitality and come to no harm. His purpose, to disprove the belief widely held in the North that Southerners were rebels and they were disloyal to the Union and the flag. Radicals predicted that he would never come back alive. So in mid-January 1868, without fear, Bates began the most sensational walk any man ever took through American history. Raw weather and muddy roads dimmed in comparison to the warmth extended him by the people along the way. He was offered money, which he refused. School children cheered him. One time, 20 ladies waited along the road with a dinner that they had prepared for him. And one evening, with snow falling, an old gentleman took off his overcoat, draped it across the sergeant's shoulders, saluted, and marched off. Thousands of Confederate soldiers were eager to offer assistance and friendship. Bates wrote, "Many times the eyes of grown men have filled with tears as I have clasped their hands. A more enthusiastic, patriotic assemblage could not be found in the North." Bates diverted from his path when told that a dying rebel captain wanted to see him, and again when a woodchopper invited him to pray over the grave of his soldier brother. The only conflict during his march occurred when 5 dogs attacked him. During his 3-month journey, Sergeant Bates proved that the Southern heart was sound and they were Americans, one family after all.
World War II, I have one song for you, written by Woody Guthrie in 1942, and it's called "The Sinking of the Reuben James." And the Reuben James was one of our warships that was escorting our Allied ships off northern Europe, and it was sunk by a German submarine. And it was probably the incident that initiated our going to war against Germany at that time. It's called "The Sinking of the Reuben James." Have you heard of a ship called that good Reuben James? And my heart like the men both of honor and fame. She flew the stars and stripes of the land of the free, but tonight she's in her grave at the bottom of that sea. Tell me what were their names, tell me what were their names. You have a friend on the good Reuben James. What were their names, tell me what were their names. You have a friend on the good Reuben James. It was there in the dark of that uncertain night that we watched for the U-boats and waited for that fight. Then a whine and a rock and a great explosion roared, with Lehighton James on that ocean floor. Tell me what were their names, tell me what were their names. You have a friend on the good Reuben James. What were their names, tell me what were their names. You have a friend on the good Reuben James. Blackbird men were drowned in that dark watery grave when that good ship went down, only 44 were saved. 'Twas the last day of October, we saved the 44 in the dark ocean waters off that cold Iceland shore. Tell me what were their names, tell me what were their names. You have a friend on the good Reuben James. What were their names, tell me what were their names. You have a friend on the good Reuben James. Many years have passed since those brave men are gone, and those cold icy waters now are still and are calm. Many years have passed and still I wonder why most of men must fight, but the best of men must die. Tell me what were their names, tell me what were their names. You have a friend on the good Reuben James. What were their names, tell me what were their names. You have a friend on the good Reuben James.
you, Guthrie.
Joyce Kilmer was known for his poem, Trees. He entered World War I in the spring of 1917. He was 34 with 4 children, and his wife was pregnant with child number 5. He was not drafted, but he volunteered. The couple's young daughter, Rose, had been paralyzed since 1913 and died just weeks before Kilmer departed for France. He was in mourning before ever reaching the front lines. March 7th, 1918, in a wood near Baccarat in France, German shell fire buried 21 American soldiers. But because of heavy artillery bombardment, they could not rescue their comrades immediately. When they were able to excavate those trapped men, 19 had died. Only 2 were rescued alive. Joyce Kilmer composed a poem to honor those who died in that tragedy, and the woods called Rouge Bouquet was read at their memorial service. At times, the rhythm of the poem echoes taps, and less than 5 months later, this poem was read again over Kilmer's grave after he was killed by a sniper's bullet. I have some stories of some people who could not be here. Obviously, Clarence Moyer passed away September 30th, 2022. He served in the Army in World War II from 1943 to 1945. He was a tank gunner with the 3rd Armored Division, 32nd Regiment. On March 6, 1945, Clarence and the tank crew defeated a feared German Panther tank in the key Battle of Cologne. And in time, Clarence became known as the hero of Cologne. Clarence received a Purple Heart, the French Medal of Legion of Honor, European Middle Eastern Medal, the Army Occupation Medal, and in 2019, he received a Bronze Star with Valor at a ceremony in Washington, D.C. Clarence's story became a best-selling book, Spearhead, written by Adam Makos. Richard Schoneberger, who passed away in 2015, actually was first in his class in Lehighton, the class of 1938. No one ever told him that from the school. I don't know, if you're first in your class, don't you think somebody should tell you that you're first in your class? But you see, Richard wasn't from the town of Lehighton. He was from one of the outlying areas. He was from East Weisport. Obviously, if he had lived in town, maybe somebody would have told him that he was first in his class. But he was from East Weisport. It wasn't until he joined the Army when the Army told him, wow, you're smart. You were first in your class. That's when he found out he was first in his class. While he was in school, he had a German pen pal. They were very close, writing each other all the time. When he joined in to go to the war, his biggest fear that he would be sent to Germany and have to face his pen pal on the battlefield. He did not want that. Actually, after the war, the pen pal and his family were starving. And so Richard would send boxes of food in order to keep them alive. I have a letter that was written Sunday, noon, August 12th, 1945. Dear Mom, Pop, Becky, and Anna, hasn't this been a most eventful, yes, very wonderful week with the atomic bomb? Thank God we found it first. Russia's entry into the war and Japan's offer of surrender. It all means so much. And I, for one, am thanking the Lord that America will soon be at peace. I can't help but feel that the war will end in a few days, which means that I should be a civilian in a few months, or anyway, by Christmas time. The day when I'm called Mr. again, I'm sure will be the happiest day in my life. So, Mom and Pop, you better start making room for 2 of your wondering sons. Ha ha. What are the latest reports on Ralph P? Let me know in your next letter. I'm writing this at Aunt Anna's and Uncle Howard's home in Burbank. It's very warm out here this afternoon, so I think I'll take life easy until it begins to cool off later in the day, at which time I'm going to Los Angeles. I'm enclosing several of the pictures of Ralph and myself, which Lorraine had taken when we were both home last June. They're not too good, but something to have anyway. Please let me know if you receive them. Well, Mom and Pop, I can't think of much more to say, except so long and good luck, and that I'm hoping to come home soon to stay. Love, Buster. So those were his thoughts on what was going on in the war.
Normally do the military salute and sing the songs of all the branches, and it's okay. This year I was looking for something more meaningful, because it's just not enough to honor you men here and all that you've given and all that you've done. I can't imagine what you've done. I've never served, and the least I could do, it's just my thanks to you. I don't have words to really express that. And in thinking how I could do this military salute, I was in my car and pressed on talk about technology. We're talking about bugle calls to wake you up in the morning, and this morning I woke up to, at 6:30, Alexa going, woo, woo, waking me up. We talk technology. So I'm going to do something with technology right now as a military salute. And I was in my car and pressed on Pandora, and this song came on, and this I thought, oh my gosh, this is just so awesome. This is really what you deserve. So let's keep our fingers crossed. So please stand when your branch of the military, when your song comes on. Please, you don't have to stand now. Thank you. First branch will be the Army. Please stand to be recognized. Thank you very much. Next branch is going to be the Coast Guard. They're ready ladies here. Thank you. Thank you. Air Force. Thank you. And the United States Navy. That was, by the way, we couldn't get the Lehighton band. Couldn't get the Lehighton band. That was the 129th Army Band. Thank you.
I just have a short thing here to read called The Soldier's Thoughts. And before I read that, I'm just going to throw out a little historic tidbit. I know we're all familiar here with the Legion of the 5 Sullivan brothers that were killed during World War II on the USS Juno off the coast of Guadalcanal. But I'm not sure if anybody realizes that we also had a young man from Lehighton that was on that same ship, the USS Juno. His name was Campbell, and he is out on the wall out in our social quarters with the other 59 men from Lehighton that gave their life during World War II. So if you ever hear the Sullivan brothers and the USS Juno, please know that there was a man named Campbell from Lehighton that was on that same ship. He was a fireman first class, which means he was down in the engine room. It was more likely the person that probably took one of the most direct hits at that time. So just a little historic tidbit to throw out there. We certainly do have a lot of historic military significance in our small town here in Lehighton and Lehighton area. This is called Soldier's Thoughts. I have a lump in my throat, Mom, and tears brim in my eyes. My buddy's gone. I saw him fall. I even heard him cry. You'll never know how I felt, Mom, as I saw him lying there. But on his face there was a smile, and on his lips a prayer. He told me just this morning, Mom, before we landed here, about his home and friends, once more memories, sweet and dear. His dad would read the Bible, and his family kneel to pray. And tears filled his eyes. Mom, as he said, though I'm not here, I know they kneel together each night in humble prayer. And when I go into battle, I see him kneeling there. I know they're praying much for me, so there's no need to fear. Of course, it may not be the plan of a loving God on high that I return, but if it be his will that I should die, there is no fear down in my heart. He knows what's best for me. I know I'm ready, and I want his and he's gone, and it's still the awful battle rages here. I may be next to go. Who knows? They're falling everywhere. And oh, how much I give to know my family lay down each night.
This last story, I was set straight because I had looked up the background of this, and of course, you set me straight as to the real story. Taps is traced to Union Officer General Daniel Adams Butterfield, who was unhappy with the lights out call used at the time of the Civil War, feeling it was too formal for day's end. He turned to Brigade Bugler Oliver Wilcox Norton to play an improvised arrangement of an official bugle call known as Scott Tattoo. The music had been set down in Silas Casey's Infantry Tactics with notes, various music used to direct troops, and had been borrowed from the French. The revised tune was first played at Harrison's Landing, Virginia, following the 7 Days Battles in 1862, part of the Peninsular Campaign. Butterfield asked Norton to revise the tune, known as Scott Tattoo, and then to shorten some notes and lengthen others, while retaining the melody. After it was to his satisfaction, it was played in place of the regulation call. The music was beautiful on that still summer night and heard far beyond the limits of the brigade. The next day, Norton was visited by several buglers from different brigades, asking for copies of the music, which he gladly furnished. There was no general order issued from Army headquarters authorizing the substitution of this for a regulation call. But as each brigade commander exercised his own discretion in such minor matters, the call was gradually taken up through the Army of the Potomac. General Butterfield did not compose an entirely new call. The earlier call was in print and in use long before Butterfield ever joined the Army. But he can be given credit for having revised a portion of an earlier bugle call into a much better call. There are no official words to the music, but there are some popular verses that have been made.